As Nrsimha Kavaca, I'm the Communications Minister for ISKCON based in Washington, D.C. And I want to thank you for tuning into this live event, which is presented by the GBC SPT Strategic Planning Team. The aim of these programs is to provide entertaining, relevant presentations, informative for our viewers and our audiences. And really want to thank everybody for joining. It's the fourth or fifth time I've had a chance to host these discussions, and I found it very informative. And please share the presentation tonight or other presentations we've had with your friend. And please follow this page on Facebook so you can learn about the wonderful upcoming events that are there. And if you have any questions, please post them in the chat box and we'll try to respond to them as best we can. So today it's my real pleasure and honor to interview and have a conversation with a good friend of mine, Nrsimha Kavaca. It's interesting. I am currently, as I mentioned, in Washington, D.C. So we're recording this at 8 o'clock at night, my time, and it's 10 o'clock in the morning, his time, which means as we go on through the conversation, if you start seeing me doze off, you know it's not because I'm asleep, it's because I'm tired at the end of a long day. And if he becomes more and more energized, you know it's because he's down under and it's getting closer to high noon, and that's where his energy is coming from. So Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu, Hare Krishna, nice to see you.
Hare Krishna.
Online here.
Great to see you. Oh yeah, doing well actually, doing well. The lockdown's been quite productive. I've actually enjoyed it.
Now we'll see how the recording goes because there seems to be some lag time between my conversation and yours. So we may have to allow a little bit of break between our questions. But I think you're hearing me okay?
Yeah, everything's coming through fine, loud and clear.
Okay, great. So just as a little bit of background, Nrsimha Kavaca is the Minister of Deity Worship, or the Deity Worship Minister for ISKCON. He's been a member of ISKCON since 1980. He's a disciple of His Holiness Indajumna Swami, and he's been the minister, which we're going to learn more about what that means to be the deity minister in a few minutes. He has been the deity minister of ISKCON since 2005, so that's 15 years. And as I mentioned before, he's based in Australia. So Nrsimha Kavaca, let's start out just some general questions because a lot of devotees may not be aware what the deity ministry is, what it does, what its goals are, what the purpose of it is. So give us a little background information about the ministry to start with.
Well, as with all ministries, the main focus is education. Trying to educate devotees in the practices of deity worship. And really what we try to focus on is just to guide devotees and inspire them in deity worship. There's a lot of challenges with deity worship. When everyone else is in the temple chanting japa, etc., you're on the altar worshiping the deity, which of course is a very blissful activity. But then it means like you lead, in some ways, quite a different life from what other devotees in the temple are leading. And so, we try to inspire and encourage devotees. And often, one thing that I can think of with that also is that often what happens is devotees, because they're on the altar during that morning period of time, then other areas of their sadhana tend to suffer a little bit. So also, we try to encourage them to be very attentive with sadhana and things like that to ensure that they're maintaining their taste in devotional service. Therefore, their interaction with the deity is going to become more positive and fruitful for them. We focus on, as I was saying, education, which means guiding devotees, training. We put on seminars around the world. We're working on live seminars right now, and also trying to inspire them as much as we can, whether it's someone in the temple, whether it's at home, or wherever someone might be in the world. Is just trying to give them guidance in deity worship.
So if you were to say a year from now, 2 years from now, you said, wow, our ministry has been really successful, what are some of the benchmarks that we would notice or that you would notice to see that?
Well, I guess the first thing I would like to see is all the curriculum we're currently teaching. In Mayapur, we run several courses throughout the year. And like we have our international diploma, which is English language. The first thing I would like to see is that all of those different units, there's about 14 different units there, which are, different types of trainings, temple worship and festivals and various types of things. We have all them online. Also establishing more regional trainings, regional campuses. We've done so far in the UK and the US. We've done, different presentations there. Also, all the various languages we're doing, Russian, Bengali, Hindi, also like to see them online as well. Children's education, like to see that online. Yeah, that'd be one element I would hope to see. Currently, we have 16 representatives in different parts of the world, representing a good proportion of ISKCON's temples. But I'd like to see that we have representatives in every country of the world wherever there's ISKCON temples, and also that we're independently funded. That's a very important thing for me, that we don't have to go around begging people for money.
You touched on a lot of topics, and I'll come back maybe one by one and ask you to get into a little bit more detail on a lot of those, because I have questions along the lines of a lot of things you just touched upon. Tell us a little bit, again, as way of a general introduction. You're the deity minister. What does that mean? What are your specific duties? You talked about what the ministry does, but what's the particular role of the minister?
I guess really, I don't really think about it so much, to tell you the truth. Excuse me. I guess really, it's like, the way I look at it is to try to facilitate others, try to encourage others, and somehow or other just work with other devotees. Because I see with all the ministries, there's so much activity for them to do, yet it's more than one person can do. So what I spend a lot of my time doing is having conversations with devotees, on Zoom or Skype or whatever, just trying to give them some input on how to render the service, and trying to connect them with the ministry. Myself, working on publications also, with another good friend of yours, Jayananda Prabhu. We're working on a book for ISKCON, like a deity worship manual. Then just answering calls. I get a lot of questions about deity worship. Of course, I do try to encourage others to take up that responsibility, because I get more emails in a day than I can deal with, and I have to apologize to devotees, because I get too many emails. I can't answer them all, because devotees want to know.
One in the world that has that problem.
Huh?
I said you're probably the only one in the world that has that problem, getting too many emails.
I don't think so. I think most devotees in ISKCON who have leadership positions have that concern. And it's just like along with the email thing, is one of the things I see is devotees. Their intention is they really want to please Krishna, and that's why they're doing deity worship. That's why they're doing devotional stuff. They want to make Krishna happy. So they have doubts about what is the proper way of doing it. So therefore, they want to get their questions answered and try to find out what is the right way of doing things, so that they can please Krishna. Sorry, my chair just went down. So that's the sort of stuff I do.
It makes me think a little bit as we're both. I'm also the communications minister. You're the deity minister, which means we both attend all of the GBC meetings. And I'm very aware, and many devotees may not be, but the deity ministry has been very active under your leadership, especially maybe the last 4 or 5 years, bringing forward proposals to the entire GBC body. So what's the purpose of that? What's the connection there? I mean, a lot of devotees may have some sense of, I'm not sure what the GBC really is doing anyway. Sometimes they're not quite sure how it affects us kind of on the local level. But tell us a little bit about those proposals and some of the work that you're trying to do there.
Well, it's like with the proposals we're presenting to the GBC, I actually have a strategy, and like we're presenting them a step at a time, and as we're able to implement them from our side, to see that things are done correctly, then we add another piece to the puzzle. And we started off with installations, because one of the things I was seeing happening across the world was that devotees were installing deities that they couldn't worship or couldn't maintain properly with adequate standards of worship. And this was happening all over. So the first thing we started to do was, okay, we need to regulate this, because things are happening which wouldn't be pleasing to Srila Prabhupada. And there's many examples of instructions he gave in this regard, saying what was an acceptable level of worship. Then so we've started to do that, and now we're kind of like bringing in sort of directions on how to care for Radha Krishna, because obviously Radha Krishna, being the Ishta Devata of our sampradaya, or our ultimate object of worship, we need to ensure that we're caring for Radha and Krishna correctly. Then also we're working on now festivals, because we're seeing. Sorry?
Just to clarify, are these standards for temples? Are these for people's homes? And we'll come back and talk more about home worship in a few minutes. But just so I'm clear and everybody's listening is clear, you're talking about standards in ISKCON temples at this point.
Yeah, mostly temples, because I mean, largely home worship. Like in the first deity worship book, that was the first formal deity worship book published in ISKCON, in the introduction, Bhakti Pragya Keshav Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada's sannyas guru, he wrote the introduction, and he makes the point there. He says the worship in the temple is based around the needs of the deity. The worship in the home is based around the needs of the family. So therefore, when it comes to home worship, largely devotees, work out their own standards. We don't, obviously can train them how to do deity worship, but in terms of if they're going to do things that may not be in keeping with temple standards, if they can't maintain the same standards of punctuality, if they can't maintain the same standards of cleanliness, etc., then they just do what they can do. And the idea is, rather than come in with too many rules and regs, is just try to encourage them to do better.
So then back to the temples, so that's the focus at this point. Let's say there's a community that's very enthusiastic and they've raised money and they're going to open a new building, and they're expecting they're going to attract so many different people, especially by having the beautiful deities there, and they just want to worship the deities. And then you guys come in with your regulations. I'll play the odd man out here. You come in with your regulations and make all kinds of requests and all kinds of demands, and we just want to love Krishna. So what are you guys getting in the way for? Too many rules and regulations. Krishna consciousness is supposed to be spontaneous devotion. So how come you have all these other ideas?
Yeah, there's a really interesting letter from Srila Prabhupada where he was talking about kitchen standards, because you're bringing this point of rules. And we have to look at where we are in devotional service. We're not Bhava Bhaktas or Prema Bhaktas. We're practicing Vaidhi, and so we have to be really, really, realistic about this. And there's a nice letter Prabhupada he wrote to a devotee. I think his name was Aniruddha Das. And in this letter, sort of Prabhupada, it was all kitchen rules and explaining so many different things about, cleanliness, this thing, that thing. And right at the end, the punchline of the letter, at least in my mind, the punchline of the letter was, Srila Prabhupada says, these are simple rules and they must be followed. If one is not prepared to follow rules, where is the proof they love Krishna? So Vaidhi, we manifest our love by following the rules of bhakti. And that's why we see in Rupa Goswami's books, especially in books like The Nectar of Devotion, the whole first half of the book, the first 19 chapters are all about rules of Vaidhi Bhakti. The whole Hari Bhakti Vilasa is about rules. So if the rules aren't important, why are they there? That's why we've got the rules. And part of our, I certainly don't want to ever take the role of being a policeman in ISKCON, because that's just not what I joined ISKCON to be. So the idea for me is to try to show to devotees why it's important to follow these rules, and then they have to make the decision to follow them. I can't force that. I just try to show them why it's important, show them instructions to the acharya and stuff like that. Why Srila Prabhupada's emphasize these things, and then they can.
So I know. Following up on that, I know one of the things that you and your team, you mentioned you've got 14 kind of regional leaders, or 16 local ministers of the deity ministry, or that. So I know that oftentimes they will visit a temple either before an installation, deity installation, or afterwards. What are some of the things that you're looking for, and what do you try to prioritize when you're there to help a local temple make sure that they are applying the rules properly in such a way that devotees do get the full benefit of worshiping the Lord in this Archa Vigraha form?
Yeah, that's kind of really interesting, because obviously there's the upfront things, things like, do they understand what it means? Do they understand the degree of commitment that's involved? And sometimes you'll find that just like we're dealing with a case right now, where they want to install a large deity, and it seems quite apparent to the local, like the regional management, the local national council, whatever they call themselves, and the ministry, that the devotees, they have no idea. So the local management's not at all in favor of this. So that's one of the first elements is to see, because we have a two-stage approval process. In the first stage, we look at their proposal, we see, like, have they thought this through carefully? Do they really understand what's involved? Do they really understand how many devotees they need to care for these deities? And of course, most temples just want to install Radha Krishna. They have large Indian congregations who don't really connect that much with Gaur Nitai, and they want to install Radha Krishna deities. And as I was saying before, Radha Krishna, Prabhupada mentioned in a letter to Gunagrahi Maharaj that Radha Krishna is the pinnacle of worship. So we need to ensure that along with installing these deities, they understand firstly what is the proper worship standards. Then we need to see that they have sufficient people, not just in terms of pujaris, but in terms of backup, because it's like, like in any deity department or any project really. Sure, you've got the people up front doing the service, but you've also got the support people who are keeping things going, making garlands, washing the paraphernalia, etc., etc. It's quite a big endeavor. I remember Murli Manohar, the head pujari from London. He did he just sort of tracked all the hours that were every day, and it was like close to 200 hours a day if you add everything in, cooking, making sweets, etc., etc. It's a huge amount of service.
In particular,
yeah, for Radha Krishna, they have Radha Krishna, Jagannath Subhadra, and Gaur Nitai and Giriraj there in London. So like any large temple has quite a significant need in terms of devotees to do on the altar, kitchen, and backup service. Then you need to look at things like stability of management. If the management's just changing every few months, which does happen in some places, how in the world are they ever going to be able to maintain a steady deity program? And then also the financial situation, how big the congregation is the congregation supportive, etc. So it's a whole picture. It's not just okay, they've got the deities, they've got the building, they've got a few pujaris. There's a big picture that they have to look at.
So this
and on our website,
important part of the
website, there's a whole list of resources, etc., that we recommend the devotees read these documents before they go down this path.
So some devotees may not realize that, but you're giving a lot of elaborate explanation here that one of the essential services that the ministry does is you're helping local communities that have a temple and are looking to install deities to understand these are the questions you've got to think through, and you've got to look at financial resources and human resources and even space resources and all those kind of things before you decide to install deities. And then they really, what's the term? They actually need to get some kind of certificate of approval from the ministry. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's called a certificate of readiness, and it's got two stages. First off, they put their application in, and we just assess based on their application if they've got a sound idea, if the proposal's sound. And then, if we see the proposal sound, then we say, okay, go ahead, purchase the deities, start fundraising, start building, because otherwise what has happened in the past is they go ahead, they put up the promotion, they invite the prime minister or the mayor or something like that. And then by the time it gets to us, we say, well, actually, you don't have the proper resources. So, we've got this two-stage process, so there's no disappointment from their side. And ISKCON's not going to look bad in the eyes of the public or anything like that.
But
the second stage.
I just want to emphasize this for temples and communities around the world. If they are growing and they're thinking about installing deities, they need to be in touch with your ministry way ahead of time, and you'll help them think through the stages in order to have a proper installation to get the blessings or the approval of the ministry. Otherwise, ISKCON at least, they're not allowed to go ahead with that.
Yeah, I encourage devotees to contact us well in advance. As soon as they start having a concept of, okay, things are looking good, we can actually, install deities here or worship deities, contacts well in advance. And it doesn't just apply to installations. The whole concept is to commence the worship of any deity. So whether you install it or not, doesn't really matter. If you're going to commence the worship of deities, you need to know, how to you need to contact us in advance so we can help you. Our goal is not to stop it. Our goal is to encourage and guide devotees. So when they go ahead and do it, they actually do it in full knowledge, and that way their likelihood of pleasing the Lord is greatly increased.
It makes me think of a couple parallels. As ISKCON matures, there's a lot of emphasis and probably some discussions on the GBC SBT programming, and certainly elsewhere. There's expression that people sometimes they plan for a year or more for a wedding, but they don't make any plans for the marriage. And really, the wedding is just beginning the marriage. That's what you really have to plan for. How are you going to spend your life together? In a similar way, people may get really excited. As you said, we'll invite the mayor and we're going to do this, and so-and-so Swami, your senior disciples are going to come, and it's all exciting. But then the next day, now you've got all these responsibilities that you're helping them think through.
Yeah. Well, there's the old saying, the person who fails to plan plans to fail. So if you don't have adequate planning, you'll experience unnecessary difficulties. And that's what we're trying to do. Even when I get involved in installations, I will generally stay there for 2 or 3 weeks after the installation to help devotees kind of acclimatize to the new environment and help them with standards like bulk offering standards and setting up the schedules and all that sort of stuff.
So the ministry,
there's a lot, there's a lot to think of.
The ministry,
we're just there to serve the devotees. Yeah, our role is to serve the devotees, to serve ISKCON in establishing deity worship and maintaining standards of worship that Prabhupada would be happy with.
Another parallel that comes to mind is, when Prabhupada was here, of course, he did things kind of that he knew he had a certain amount of time, and sometimes he had to do things a bit in a hurry. And we know famous stories of Prabhupada praying to the deities in Australia. What can I do? I'm leaving you in the hands of these people that aren't so well trained. But since Prabhupada's departure, ISKCON has tried in many, many ways to put systems in place to support the temples, support the devotees, and support the communities. And, another example comes to my mind, which is sannyasis, devotees that are aspiring to take sannyas. At this point, it's not just, okay, I want to, give up the world and become sannyas. There's procedures, and generally there's at least a 5-year kind of a testing period of time, and one has to make sure if they were married that their wife is in agreement with the decision, and the children are grown up and the finances are all straightened up, and they've got to show some maturity. Understanding this is a very serious commitment for a man to make, or family really. They're giving the father or the husband into the sannyas house. Even more so with the deities, because it's the Lord we're taking care of.
Well, it's in one sense, there's a good analogy you're drawing there, because it has the same kind of outcomes. It's just like in a marriage. If you enter into a marriage and you don't go through it properly, you don't conduct the marriage properly, it affects the lives of many people. And it can leave very positive impressions on people, or it can leave very negative impressions. So in the same way with deity worship, if we don't do it properly, then it has the potential to affect the lives of many devotees, and can leave, it can damage devotees in many ways. So that's just what we're trying to do, is just try to ensure that devotees get a really positive experience, because by getting this positive experience in deity worship or in any element of Krishna consciousness, devotional service, it leaves them a positive impression, which will then impel them or drive them back to the spiritual realm. So, deity worship can deliver you the lowest feet of Krishna if you just do it the way that the Acharyas outlined. It's a very simple thing.
Well, you kind of open up a question I have, just a basic kind of philosophical question. Someone who has some knowledge of Krishna consciousness may say, well, Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu, maybe you haven't read, but, Lord Chaitanya's whole movement is based on chanting and going out into the streets and inspiring everybody to take the Lord's holy name. And we know Srila Prabhupada, his whole focus, he said, if you ever get money, his Guru Maharaj told him, print books, print books, print books. Prabhupada certainly put an emphasis on book publishing. Lord Chaitanya, just to put the emphasis on chanting the holy name. Obviously, Prabhupada stressed that as well. So one may ask, well, where does deity worship work within this kind of hierarchy of what responsibilities devotees have as individuals and also temples?
Yeah, it's kind of really interesting, and this is a point that often comes up, because devotees say, well, it's not the Yuga Dharma, etc., etc. There's a really interesting quotation in the Madhya Lila, chapter 15, text 108, I think it is. And Srila Prabhupada's quoting extensively from the Bhakti Sandarbha. And Jiva Goswami is explaining that, yes, it's the opinion of Bhagavatam that initiation is not necessary and deity worship is not necessary. And that just by chanting the holy names, that one can be delivered back to the lotus feet of Krishna. It's a fact. But then Jiva Goswami goes on to explain that, but insofar as we've experienced that those who approach us for initiation, their minds are so contaminated by the modes of material nature, therefore, at the point of initiation, they're obliged to do deity worship. And the thing I find remarkable about this is Jiva Goswami was saying this almost 500 years ago. So how much more important is it now? When there was no Facebook, there was no Snapchat, there was none of these things 500 years ago. It was just like, Jiva Goswami was living in the Dham, and people were coming and approaching him for guidance in spiritual life. And he's saying, well, no, their minds are too contaminated. Where are we now? It's like the effect that social media is having on the world. It's like every second your phone's popping up with some notification about what's happening here, what's happening there, and it just agitates the minds of everyone. So it's very relevant for us. And yes, we have the chanting of Hare Krishna, and yes, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra is the Yuga Dharma. But in order to practice Yuga Dharma effectively, we need personal purification. It gives us that stability, it gives us that steadiness, it gives us that personal purification, so that we can, sit down and peacefully chant the holy names of Krishna.
Okay, very good. Let's go back to your particular service, if I can. We know during this COVID-19 shutdown, everybody's doing what we're doing now, talking on Skype or Zoom or various different kind of formats. But in the recent years, I know you traveled quite a bit. Tell us a little bit about your travels pre this shutdown period, and what did that entail, and how often were you spending time on the road?
I haven't been on a plane for 3 months. It seems like really strange. But I spent half the year on the road, traveling, internationally and domestically around Australia. And the whole point was the same kind of thing. Is like, definitely devotees will get benefit from online presentations and whatever, like they may do remotely. But I found that the real benefit comes for many devotees is when you actually sit down with them when they're on the altar, or you watch them do the worship, and they learn so much from that. I remember one time it was a funny thing. I was at a temple somewhere in the world, and the devotee had heard about this procedure called Manasadapaniya Snan, where the idea is you set up a mirror and you bathe the deity's reflection in the mirror if you can't bathe the deity directly. But he had the mirror set up so he was looking at himself in the mirror and he's bathing his reflection. So he, because he'd only read about it but not seen it demonstrated, he didn't really understand the actual detail of the procedure. So there's many things like this that you really learn firsthand. You're not necessarily going to learn so well remotely. And just getting to meet devotees and just developing relationships and things like that, I find that very helpful also.
So part of it is, in addition to ensuring installations properly, temples are planning properly, you actually go and visit communities, build relationships with pujaris, train them, help them understand things in a more clear fashion, support them, etc., through your personal presence there.
Yeah. I mean, of course, I try to maintain the connection remotely, but I do find it much more effective is when you're present there, because it's like when someone's kind of on the other side of the world, the need doesn't seem so imperative as what's right in front of you. So it's much easier to maintain relationships and connections. And I found in certain communities that I have built up relationships also with the devotees there, and yeah.
Okay,
so I keep trying to maintain those as well.
Let's talk for a couple of minutes. We've been focusing on worship in the temples and the standards and how you go and support people and from the installation forward. Let's talk a little bit. We had a question that came up on the chat, and I know you do work helping devotees that are having some worship of deities in their homes. To tell us what the ministry's done on that, and if someone wants to get benefited from the ministry to understand how they can have some deities properly in their home, how would you educate and encourage them?
Yeah, we've just been doing a webinar over the past 5 weekends, every Saturday, 4 p.m. Australian time. That's broadcast on Zoom, also on Facebook Live on the ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry page. And like this Saturday will be the final one. It's a 6-part series. Those videos are also being uploaded to YouTube. We're currently working on a temple worship online course, and then after that's completed, we'll be working on a home online course. So that will give devotees those different options. But they can go to our YouTube channel and connect there and see the presentations have been there so far. Covered like a bit of theory or philosophy behind it, but also the practical things about having an altar in your home. Also about some of the basic procedures, things like that. Last week we covered bulk offering. This week we're going to do arati.
So to find recordings of those, tell us again where they go to find that.
Okay, so on Facebook, ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry has a Facebook page. If they sign up to our Facebook page, they can watch that there. Also, all the videos at this point are pinned to the top on the announcements, and they're also contained in the videos link. If you on the left-hand side of the main page, there's video links there, so they can go there. Also, for those who use YouTube, they can visit our ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry YouTube channel, and the videos are also there, along with many other practical how-to videos, how to do a bulk offering, how to do archman, how to make a Brahmin thread, how to make ghee wicks, different things like that. So, and there's a few short segments from Nrsimha and Jnana Sabu, a little bit of philosophy about deity worship, why Lord Chaitanya wears a peacock, other things like that.
Mm-hmm. So all those resources are available there online now.
Yeah, the YouTube, there's quite a lot of resources there. And of course, we're always looking to do more and more. So if devotees have any suggestions on things they would like to see, like videos they'd like to see, whether it's philosophy of deity worship, whether it's practical how-to videos. I've just sort of set myself up with a bit of a streaming studio here now. So I've got the resources whereby I can start to develop these things, and I've done it a few times now. So initially, like the idea of being behind on the other side of the camera was a little bit daunting, but now I'm a bit more comfortable with it, so I don't mind to do it.
So if someone is
I've always been on the back end of the camera.
I'm thinking in terms of the training, I'd also like you to talk a little bit about the work with the Mayapur Academy and when that was established, and what you've been doing there. I think that really is perhaps the most sophisticated training program that's there for all the various, I don't know, there might be 15, 20 different ministries formally in ISKCON, and I think you have the most highly developed educational program. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, so we established the Mayapur Academy probably 2006, I don't remember the year, but probably 2006. In Mayapur, in the Chaitanya Bhavan, we've got some large classrooms there and a library. And previously I had been doing it in conjunction with the Mayapur Institute, or at that point it was the Mayapur Institute for Higher Education. And while that was working well for us, we really need to have dedicated classrooms with sinks and all that kind of stuff in it, because devotees have to wash paraphernalia and stuff, and it's a bit hard when you don't have any water or sinks or whatever. So we developed this whole school there in Mayapur, and we train devotees in many different elements of deity worship. Obviously, the basic daily temple worship, how to offer arati, how to offer bhoga, how to bathe and dress the small deities. We also have, I think 12 sets of small deities where devotees can practice all that. We also have a dressing course where we have fiberglass molds where they can learn how to dressed Radha Krishna, Krishna Balaram, Jagannath Balaram, so we have large models of them. We also teach them festivals, how to care for Tulsi, how to make, sort of basic things like dressmaking, jewelry making, cooking, just all the basic elements of day-to-day deity worship. Also, as I mentioned with festivals, also we've got a really interesting module there, or unit there, called Brahminical Culture and Ethics, because it's one element, one part of it is to know the skills, but as you know, the skills are only a small part of the whole picture. The main thing is the values the devotee holds. So the Brahminical Culture and Ethics is about guiding devotees in what are the intrinsic values that a Brahmana holds dear. And so that's what the whole thing is aimed at. And we found it it's been very successful. And now we want to look at how to expand that regionally. So as I mentioned, we've already done it once at New Vrindavan. Jai Krishna Prabhu really nicely facilitated us there, and it was a very successful event. And we also did it the year before that in the UK at Bhaktivedanta Manor. Shruti Dharma Prabhu, he also very kindly facilitated us there. And we were planning to. I was actually meant to be there now, doing this, but because of the amazing world situation that's going on right now, that I just had to put that on hold. So, but that's kind of pushed me into really deepening my understanding of how essential it is to get an online presence, like a really significant online presence, not just like we've got a website and we've got a YouTube channel and a Facebook page, but we're really reaching out and connecting with devotees online. I really feel this is a big way forward for ISKCON, is to really grow our online presence significantly.
Well, let me
that's where
a couple of questions just to clarify, because you mentioned a program that's going on at the Mayapur Academy, and very comprehensive. And then you mentioned we're doing the same thing in New Vrindavan, Jayananda. And from what I know, Jayananda, as an example, went to New Vrindavan for a week, touched on a few things, but certainly that's very different from what you're doing at the Academy. So if someone wants to come and be enrolled, how long is that program? How much does it cost? Who are you welcoming into that? Let's talk about that as a unit a little bit more deeply first.
Sure. Well, the whole course goes for 4 months or 16 weeks, which in itself is quite significant and has quite an effect on devotees to be in Mayapur Dham doing devotional service for 4 months. We find that it's really a life-changing experience for devotees. And during that 4-month period, they cover all the different elements I mentioned before. Of course, there are core units which they need to do, and there are a number of electives, and obviously they can't do all the electives because some of them are overlapping in terms of the timing. And in terms of the cost, I don't have much to do with that, but I think it's 30 or 35,000 rupees. I don't, I handle more the overall administration and
so that's what, $500 US, maybe what, 300 pounds or something like that? For those of us,
about three to 350 pounds. Yeah.
Okay, so for 4 months training, that's approximately what you would pay for 2 days of any kind of professional course anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, sure. You actually, I know many courses you're paying $2,000 or $3,000 for a weekend.
Yeah.
So for what they're getting, it is super value. It's quite intensive. I mean, devotees shouldn't go there with the idea, I'll do the Deity worship course and I'll do Bhakti Shastri. I mean, Bhakti Shastri in itself is a demanding course, and this course is very demanding. A minimum 4 hours a day, and there's homework, there's extracurricular activities, and also on the weekends we have Saturday service day, where because a lot of what we're doing has been facilitated by the Mayapur Deity Department. So on Saturday, the devotees have the opportunity to kind of give back, and we have them engaging in practical service on the altar, in the kitchen, in the go-downs in Mayapur. So they'll go on Radha Madhava's altar, they'll clean the altar. They'll clean the walls. They'll clean all the singasaras and stuff. The men will get to go on Nrsimha's altar and clean Nrsimha's altar. The ladies will get to go and clean on Panchatattva altar. So there's plenty of opportunities for service there. Also in the kitchen, they get the opportunity to cook for the deities. They also help with festivals, particularly the Sant Panchami and what's the other one? Pushpa Abhishek. They get to help facilitate that festival. So there's plenty of like there's theoretical element of it in the classroom, but also there's a lot of opportunity for practical application of the knowledge, skills, and values they're learning on the altar.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful opportunity to be able to go to Mayapur and actually learn for 4 months, and then you can go on Radha Madhava's altar, Panchatattva, and to be a Lord Nrsimha. And I know I've had the opportunity to be there for some of the graduation ceremonies, and those devotees that have gone through that are always very inspired and feel very enthused to go back. Many of them coming from all over the world, South America, North America, Africa, all across India, Europe, the Russian region, Australasia, etc., and very inspired to go back to their temples or their communities and help them worship their deities more nicely. So it is a very successful program.
Yeah, we're always honored by your presence there. So please keep coming.
Yeah, just it's always a highlight of my visit. I want to take a couple questions that are coming up on a chat, and one that I think comes up often related to what you spoke about earlier, needing to make sure that the deities, the managers are planning properly for the deity worship, not just for the installation, but continued worship. So I'm going to read something as a chat that some temples have many deities. Some were installed many years ago, but now temples have less devotees often, and the deity worship department struggles. So what's the proper way to keep or continue deity service in that instance? And what's the most important aspect to keep going? And what can be done? What can be downsized or not? And if it's not possible to answer this question in one shot, how do they get you all to come in and help them figure out what to do?
It's kind of a complicated question because it's not a one size fits all. Every situation is different, and I think it's a conversation that probably needs to involve local management, local GBC ministry, etc. Because if you just focus on the worship on the altar, then that's not really going to help the situation improve. I think you also need to work on developing the community, cultivating the community, look at how to get, and of course, there's also there's elements like you can look at short-term elements. Okay, some temples for a short-term solution have imported devotees, and that works in the short term, but it's not a long-term solution. Then we need to look at medium-term solutions. Who in the community can we pull in to get involved? And then we need to look at long-term solutions on how to get more devotees in the temple, how to inspire people in Krishna consciousness. For instance, in this community where I live, they have this program called Krishna Village, which is kind of like a yoga training kind of thing. And even though it may seem like it's disconnected from the temple in some ways, part of what they're doing is they have to do service at the temple. They do cleaning at the temple. They cut up the vegetables for the lunches and the breakfast and things like that. And also they have this proviso that there's this kind of situation where if they attend the Bhagavatam class, then they can avoid doing certain services down at the village. So you find that many of them will actually participate in the Bhagavatam class as well. And so naturally, as Prabhupada said, the Krishna conscious poison is being injected into their brain, and they start to become attracted to Krishna consciousness. After a few weeks or a few months, you find they're walking around with a bead bag on their hands, and they're starting to wear devotional clothing, and they're wearing tilak and things like that. So I think temples need to explore avenues whereby they can somehow or other bring more people in. Because you find a lot of these places where the deity worship is struggling is like, if you look at it, when was the last time they had initiation? And you find that some temples haven't had initiations for a long time. So we need to look at these, bringing devotees in, trying to get more people in the community, but also long term, how can we build it? How can we grow the community? And I think here, in many aspects, they're doing very, very successfully like that. The community's really grown a lot from being just like this, one of these temples where they've been struggling to maintain their worship, to now it's definitely improving. It's got a way to go, but it's definitely improving.
Let me ask a bit of a controversial question. I don't know if it's actually happening, but I've heard that there's some communities that either require or consider requiring, if someone's going to take a second initiation, they'll say, look, you're already initiated, you got a spiritual name. If you're going to become Brahminically initiated, then you should take direct responsibility to worship the deities and help us lovingly care for the Lord in his Murti form. Does the ministry have an opinion on that?
Quite a strong opinion. Actually, it's kind of interesting because I had this conversation with Banaswami a few days ago. We're lucky he's quarantined, but he's on lockdown with us here now. He's been here for the past 3 months. And what we find happens in ISKCON is oftentimes Diksha, both first and second, has seen more of a social etiquette, if you like, rather than actually what's the practical spiritual function of them. So the whole function behind second initiation is simply to do deity worship. It has no other function than that. It's not like it's some kind of like social kind of position you achieve or anything like that. No, the reason you get the mantras, the only reason you get the mantras is because those mantras are required to do deity worship. No other reason for it. So if someone's going to get second initiation, but they're not going to do deity worship, what's the meaning of the Diksha? It's meant for deity worship.
Okay, so everyone can remember, you heard it here the first time on the GBC SPT channel, that the deity ministry is strongly, quoting you, strongly advocating if someone wants to take second or Brahminical initiation, the reason for that should be because they want to worship the deity, the installed deities at the temple. Otherwise, you're saying there's no real need for it.
No, I mean, you don't need Gayatri. You don't need Pancharatri Gayatri Diksha to go back to Godhead. And according to Jiva Goswami, you don't even need Diksha to go back to Godhead. If you can actually get the shelter of the name, that's sufficient to deliver you. So this whole idea that you need Gayatri Diksha to go back to Godhead, which has been tweaked in this time at various times, is not correct.
Yeah, and as you said, it certainly shouldn't be some kind of social thing. Well, I need to get second initiation because that ups my status, or people honor me more. That certainly would not be a proper understanding of the purpose. So thank you for clarifying that really should be the idea.
But even because my friends have got it, this is often, the social pressures, peer pressure, my friends got Diksha, I need to get Diksha. This is not the reason for it. The reason is devotional service. The motivation must be devotional service. Why get Diksha? Second initiation is so that I can serve the deity. That's the reason.
Very good. Very good. Tell us a little bit about, you mentioned early in the conversation about some of the books that you've published. And I remember there was a beautiful book that was put together by the ministry about painting the faces of the deities. I think the name of the book was Dots. I bought a couple of those friends that are pujaris in different temples, and they loved it. But you published other things too. Tell us a little bit about that book and some of the other things you published and what's coming up.
Well, I mean, that's coming up. Okay, we've published that. We published 5 magazines. We kind of put the magazines on hold for a while. We published 5 different magazines on, called the Archan Journal. The thing we're working on now, Jai Nandaprabhu and I are working on now, is the next edition of ISKCON's Deity Worship Manual. With the, I had thought that with this lockdown, rather than traveling, I'd be able to focus on that. But because I've had to focus on these webinars and stuff to keep the training going, because like in Mayapur now we're supposed to be doing on-site training, so we've had to keep the training going to keep the relevance of the Mayapur Academy and the ministry there in devotees' minds, etc. So I haven't actually done as much work on that as I was planning to. But Jayananda and I will be having a call, I think tomorrow, actually, on that to move it forward. The book's half done, and we're working on the second part. now.
So we
hopefully-
apologize for keeping you online, but we'll let you know there's only about 10 minutes to go. So as soon as we finish, you can get another chapter finalized today on the upcoming book. We don't want to keep it away from that project too much.
No, I'm on another call working on developing the online courses.
Here's another question.
Most of my days are 3-4 calls.
Here's an interesting question that's coming in. We know that the role of women sometimes in our movement is interpreted in different places in different ways. What's the proper way for ladies to be engaged? Are there any boundaries that should be different than what's there for men? So a question comes up in India, at least in some places in India, women are not allowed to do deity worship. I don't think that's the standard in all Indian temples, but some. What's your understanding of that policy, and what's the deity minister? Do you have a position on that? And do you think where there are restrictions, do you think that will change or should change?
It really is a case-by-case basis, and we don't interfere with local decisions. Mm-hmm. As far as what is our standpoint on it, devotional service is not based on the body. Devotional service is an activity of the soul. So, to discriminate on people based on the body is material consciousness. And we see, if we look at our founder, Acharya Srila Prabhupada, he didn't do that. He engaged people according to their enthusiasm to do devotional service. And naturally, we need to consider that, if you have men and women together in a secluded environment, you're creating a risky situation. So we don't act foolishly or capriciously. We consider the nature of the individuals, but and I know in some temples, for instance, that they'll have like X amount of days per week for the brahmacharis and X amount of days per week for the grihastas. These are temples in India that do this, and they're finding it works quite well. The ladies get the opportunity to do devotional service. Usually you find in those temples you won't have the ladies doing arti or public service, but they get to dress the deities and they can do things behind the doors and stuff. And my understanding is they're quite happy over that. Mm-hmm. In terms of larger temples like Mayapur and Vrindavan, I can't imagine that will ever change. But I do know that when Prabhupada was opening the Vrindavan temple, they didn't have enough pujaris to dress the deities, and Srila Prabhupada said then Jamuna can dress. Mm-hmm. So, he didn't have a problem with the ladies being involved in deity worship. Although I think in the end they did find sufficient men to do the worship.
I think also the Calcutta temple comes to mind that Prabhupada had some ladies worshiping the deities in the Calcutta temple. So during his time, women in ISKCON temples did worship and dress the deities.
Yeah. Narayani and her husband were the pujaris there during Prabhupada's time for many years. So it wasn't uncommon, and in the public programs for the Prabhupada in India, he often would have women doing the worship.
So let's
but we need to consider various social norms and things like that, but also the fact that devotional service is the soul's connection with Krishna. It's not something based on the body.
Mm-hmm. So looking ahead a little bit, you've really outlined a lot of things that the deity ministry is offering to temples, to individual devotees, to devotees that have deities at home, to understand how they can worship their home deities, how we can improve our standards. So much training and education is there. What if, and hopefully some of the devotees that are listening to this broadcast live or will hear it later on, if they get really inspired, or if they get a little bit inspired and they say, I'd like to help, I'd like to get more involved. Maybe I'm already helping worshiping deities at our temple, or maybe not. Maybe just want to help with the ministry. How can they get involved and how can they help?
Well, there's a big long list of things that devotees could help with. We have different, and I know you've got the same needs in your ministry. We've discussed these things numerous times. A lot of IT projects we've got going on, developing databases. We want to have a database which is, listing all the temples in the world, all the deities, what worship standards they have, etc., etc. Online courses, very, very important element. Contact management, etc. Devotees who can write curriculum, Also, devotees can take the existing curriculum we've got and turn it into online courses or webinars and things. So we need content creators, devotees with experience in publishing. So much publishing work is there. It's just a matter of, like, right now I'm doing all the layout work and I've got so many other things, I just can't fit it all in. One thing very important I feel is regional representatives. We're looking for devotees to represent ISKCON Deity Worship Ministry in every country in the world. Marketing, another very important thing, to help us develop a cohesive marketing strategy, to get us up on all the various platforms around the world, to keep the deity worship, not necessarily the ministry, but to keep the deity worship forefront in the minds of devotees. So ultimately what's happening is they're keeping Krishna in the forefront of their consciousness. So this is really, really important, the marketing. And of course, funding. We really have this year. I was just going through it last night. Close on half of the funding for the ministry comes from when I'm traveling. And probably 6 months this year I won't be traveling. So it's really hitting us hard in that area, which means that we'll struggle with a few things,
Yeah, and it's on some of the needs you mentioned: layout, marketing, deity worship representatives, publishing, funding, also design work, marketing. Marketing is on the screen there also. So a lot of people can get involved, and they are putting on the screen how they can get in touch with, which is important. And when you mention funding, it's interesting. It's something that I personally feel ISKCON needs to mature quickly and substantially, because there's a tendency to give money to individuals sometimes, or there's a tendency to give money to specific projects without understanding that global ministries like the Deity ministry is so important. And I've heard rumors that at some point in time, in not too many years ago, while you were the Deity minister, because lack of funds, you were actually washing pots at a temple in Australia, being paid by the hour, so you could maintain your family, so that in your spare time you could volunteer as the Deity minister. Is that an exaggerated claim, or is that a fact?
Yeah. No, it's a fact. I used to wash pots about 4 days a week.
4 days a week. So I think,
and my wife was also cleaning.
Yeah, I want to emphasize this. So here we have a Deity minister. Those of you listening live or later can see the amount of commitment that Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu is making, and he's got 16 representatives around the world that are doing similar types of commitment, and devotees are around the world not coming forward. And most places have a relatively affluent congregation, and I think that they should understand this is a very worthwhile use. As Prabhupada says many times, that if you're a householder especially, you should donate your funds to help push on the movement. And that doesn't mean just giving to individuals, but means supporting some of the fantastic work that's going on through this Deity ministry work. So I would encourage people. There's a way you can get a hold of Nrsimha Kavaca Prabhu. It's his email is there on the screen before us now. And please come forward and try to help in other ways they can. We've just got a couple minutes left. Any other things you'd like to share with people about the work that you do or the ministry?
Not really. I mean, just basically our whole approach is just to try to facilitate devotees connecting with Krishna. That's really what it's all about. And if devotees find that inspiring and they'd like to get involved, then please contact me, or they can contact their local representative. In the US, you have Jayananda. In the UK, you have Murli Manohar. In South Africa, Sachi Kumar. You can contact your local people to find out, how to get involved.
Why don't you tell us? You name three. Tell us where some of those different regional representatives are located.
Sorry, you're cracking up a bit there.
Yeah, you named three, but just real briefly, you've got Jayanandas in North America. You said name some of those highlighted places where you've got representatives they can get in touch.
So we have Gita Mita and Sri Janavi in Brazil. We have Jayananda in North America. We have Sachi Kumar in South Africa. We have Ram Rup in Kenya, Botswana, and Indonesia area. We have Maturanath in Philippines. We have Sevatula and Shitalanga Garanga Prabhu in India. We have Damodar Priya in Germany and Austria. We have Nayana Manjari in Switzerland and France. We have Krishna Kirti in Latvia. We have Vaikuntanath in Lithuania. And I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody.
That's a pretty big list. That's very impressive. That's very, very impressive. So we're about out of time, but
well, we're looking for more.
Okay.
More devotees.
Oh, you're looking for more to expand and add to your team of 16.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, we're just about running out of time. I want to thank you for taking your time. I want to apologize to devotees that have been watching this program or will be watching it. We have had some, at least on my screen, some technical glitches. Oftentimes, Nrsimha Kavaca, your image is coming a little slow. Perhaps mine is too, but the voice content has flowed pretty well. So hopefully everyone will be able to benefit from the conversation, from the points that you've made. And on behalf of a lot of comments, is that one devotee, I did the training last year in New Vrindavan. It was super intense, but also blissful. Thank you very much. Very inspiring. A lot of people are appreciating your work. So thank you for what you're doing. Continue doing so. And thanks for sharing your insights and your experience and your wisdom.
If I could just make one final,
Please.
If I can make one final comment.
Please do.
Last year, I was in hospital and I had a major operation. And I'm sure many of the devotees listening contributed to the fund that helped pay for the operation. So I just really like to thank my deep thanks to them all to help me in that moment of need. I really appreciate that.
Wonderful. That was
Thank you very much.
Example of devotees coming forward to show how much they care for you.
Yeah.
And I would just encourage everyone, there's plenty of opportunity to continue that show of appreciation for the minister, for the ministry, and for maintaining the wonderful deity worship that Srila Prabhupada wanted to spread all around the world. So again, thank you very much. Thank all of you for listening to this GBC SPT presentation interview with Nrsimha Kavaca, who is the deity minister of ISKCON. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. And again, there's lots of opportunities to help assist him and the ministry and the regional representatives around the world. So please do get involved. Thanks for paying attention, and thanks for tuning in. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.